Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Hive in Session. As always, I'm your host, Ben, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Iain Herdman from Karbon Homes. Iain, thank you for coming on with me today.
No problem, Ben. Great to be here. Looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much. And so, Iain, I understand what we're going to be talking about today is, employee voice. No surprise, we're the big employee voice people, of course. And your particular use case is that you kind of unlocked the power of the employee voice to really, I suppose, co-author and kind of co-create an attitude and an ethos towards kind of more flexible working at Karbon Homes. Is that right?
Absolutely. The challenges that we've had over recent months have been significant, and having our employees play an integral part in what work looks like now, but also what it's going to look like in the future, has been absolutely key. And I think the involvement that we've had through a number of different avenues and a number of different channels has been really fundamental success that we've had. I'm sure we'll come on to talk about it in a little bit. Yes, Hive's been part of that, absolutely. But what I would say to everybody out there is it hasn't been the only platform that we've used. We've used our own. We've had some great virtual workshops, which have been challenging in this current environment, but they've been fantastic. And we've got a really strong colleague forum as well, who've played a really big part in this for us.
Let's take it back sort of. I mean, I'm sure this probably isn't when I suppose the best question is like, when did you first decide that employee voice was what you wanted to do? But I suppose if we take it as read, right, that it was always an interesting source of information and ideas and feedback, right? If we go back to maybe, 14, 15 months, Iain, we're on the precipice of what we didn't know was going to end up being, almost an 18-month lockdown pretty much, right? Like, it was at that stage, was it, when you guys kind of all got together and just sort of thought like, right, we need to make sure that we're keeping in much more regular or maintaining regular contact with our people. Is that right?
I think that's fair to say. Yeah, we already had what I would say was a good structure in place. Mm-hmm. But I think that the challenges that we faced just meant that we had to delve deeper, if that's the way of best explaining it. It was really sort of understanding what people were looking for, listening to what their challenges were, listening to what their ideas were, because there's a lot of things that we've done have actually been driven by what colleagues have told us, and we were really open about that at the first to go, this is new to everybody. We don't have all of the answers, and we really want to hear what you've got to say to us around this. And it produced some really interesting feedback and really opened our eyes, I think, to the fact that a large number of colleagues were prepared to experiment and prepared to take risks. And actually, that's one of the biggest things that's come out of all of this for us as an organisation, about really trying to further cement that experimenting and adapting behaviour that we want to have across the organisation. So we're looking to take the positives, and we're continuing our work with colleagues as we move through developing our flexible way of working. Because I think one of the key things I would like to say is that I'm not sure we'll ever fully crack it. For me, it's a development and it's an iterative process. The individual dynamics are such that people's circumstances can change overnight. And therefore, what worked for them one day doesn't necessarily work for them the next. So we've really tried to work hard on creating that culture of going, you're going to continually experiment, you're going to continually adapt. We're going to make mistakes, but that's okay. That's fine. Let's just keep moving forward and see what we can do to help people.
I think that is, it's a really good attitude to have. I mean, I think the idea that anybody is going to crack this first time and this is going to be implemented, is total folly. I think that what the last sort of 14, 15 months has shown to everyone is that, necessity is the mother of invention, and that when you really have to move, you can move. But likewise, it's a cliche. People say new normal, people say build back better, whatever they want to look at, right? But it's the same with anything. When you're kind of at the very first stages of things, there is just that learning process. The idea that we're going to have, the shift to remote, that would have taken 10 years really, had there not been a pandemic on. So, I think that, the idea that there's obviously going to be mistakes made and learnings to be done. And I think that's what I'm trying to say. But it definitely occurs to me that by offering, offering by the business, offering themselves up and having that vulnerability, and likewise being open to giving people the opportunity to chime in and have their say and give ideas. It just makes the process a lot smoother, right?
Absolutely. And it's really interesting to talk about that vulnerability from an organization perspective. One of our real learning points has been how much we've looked to our leader population to show the way, to make this a flexible approach part of everyday conversations, and almost have that, I don't like using very technical terms, but the psychological safety to come back and sort of say, actually, that doesn't work for me, or actually, I've got this personal issue that I need to deal with, or I've got these care and responsibilities, whatever that might be, and having the space to do that. And we haven't made any grand statements from leaders across the organization. We haven't sort of put people on a pedestal and gone, broadcast how great this is. It's been the little things, Ben. So some really small things like leaders talking about making time for their own well-being during the day, whether that's been going for a walk or going for a run, booking the time out in their calendars. All of our calendars across the whole organization are visible, so people can see where everybody is. We've put little footers on our emails to talk about how we're working flexibly. And it might well be that, for example, I might send an email to my team late on an evening because that fits with how I'm working, but I've made it really clear that they don't have to respond. And just those little things have really helped, and people have sort of gripped onto those smaller things and started to live those behaviors. So showing the way has been key for us. And I know I'm probably saying stuff that people already know, but genuinely we've got some great responses to those smaller things across the business. So that's something which we're definitely looking to continue as we keep moving and keep iterating. One of the bits that we've looked at here is that I mentioned earlier that we aren't at a finishing place for this. You mentioned 14, 15 months ago what was happening. We feel as though that we've gone from one extreme to another. We've gone from a very, very structured approach to work pre-pandemic to something which almost had no rules attached to it, apart from you can't go into the office, almost. And what we've done is through our conversations with colleagues and through engaging them through the different platforms that we've got, is we've started to understand that people want to find the balance between the two. Nobody's sitting going, I absolutely loved the pre-pandemic way of working, and nobody's going, I love the current way of working. They're going, there's great elements out of both, but let's try and find the balance.
100%. I was, I was having a similar conversation with my colleagues at Hive, saying that I think that, the business that, speaking generally, the business that any business was, right? You're probably not that business anymore. The business that you've had to be for the last little while, it's this like Frankenstein's monster. It doesn't really know what it wants to be or how it wants to work, or, when we think about what's really important to me, like what culture it has. And so, it stands to reason that we need to have a collective voice around what kind of company do we want to build? What kind of culture do we want to reintroduce? And of course, one would assume that would be a culture of greater flexibility, greater understanding, greater compassion as it relates to, people's well-being and resilience and things like that. I think we've all learned a lot of positive lessons from this, but, not to labor the point too strongly, but we only get these learnings by sort of cupping an ear and hearing what it is people have had to say, and by earning their trust to really tell us what's happening.
Absolutely. And being able to demonstrate that we've listened to what the colleagues have said and then we've responded in that manner was key. And you mentioned a couple of things there which we've built up, because it would be difficult for me to put my finger on one thing across the whole of this. So this is a massive change for people. We've invested strongly and quickly in changing our adaptive leader program. We already had a program running for our manager population in the organization. And what we did is we quickly adapted the modules on that to look at change management, to look at those types of skills, to navigate them through times when it's very grey and muddy. There aren't any, as I mentioned, any rules. Well-being was a real strong focus for us. We made some really key decisions early on that was going to form one of our core pillars as how we were going to look at our flexible working piece. And you know what? The colleagues responded brilliantly. We've got a well-being Teams channel set up now where anybody in the organisation can join it. You've got people posting pictures of their things that they've been baking. We've got people looking at Strava runs, swims, walks, yoga, whatever it might be. And that's really helped us as well in terms of this work-life balance, which is a very traditional way of looking at it. And we're talking about flexibility now. But a lot of people still view it as, how can I balance those two responsibilities that I've got in my life? And the output that we've had from using Hive to check in as to how people are doing on this has been fantastic. We've seen a remarkable increase in employee views on that from compared to pre-pandemic to what it is now. So we're on a real positive trend. But we're very conscious that there's still some work to do, really conscious. We know there's going to be nervousness around lockdown measures gradually easing. We know the roadmap from the government has got what people see as a bit of a deadline day of the 21st of June. And we're working really hard at the moment to say to people, that doesn't mean there's going to be an automatic return to what it used to be. We've got so many good things out of this, and we want to continue those. So we're working hard on communicating with colleagues, listening to their concerns again about returning to offices. What's that going to look like? What are the offices going to look like? Are they still going to be safe? All of these types of things. So I think one of the other key things that we've been able to learn through the process is, although the government might have a roadmap in relation to a pandemic, you don't have a well-plotted, set-out roadmap for how you're going to work in the future. We're trying to give our colleagues some shared ownership of what this looks like moving forward. We've talked a lot as a business around empowering our colleagues. This is a fantastic opportunity for us to do that. And some of the plans we've got moving forward are really, really going to help colleagues to shape this within their own teams. So we aren't looking moving, and we've got a lot of work to do. We've got some consultation events to do. We've got some activities with our trade unions and things like that to look at. But at the moment, our stance is we don't want to put in place what you would class as a flexible working policy. We think that that's going to be too restrictive. We think that that tries to throw a blanket across people. And one of the really core messages we got from our colleagues was, one size will not fit all in relation to this. But with that comes some accountability and some responsibility for everybody to share ownership of resolving the challenges that we're going to face. So it's going to be some really interesting times moving forward. And I think we're all going to be pretty busy trying to put our way through this.
Definitely. I mean, you do well to point out, Iain, that of course, like, you know, a platform such as Hive isn't the sort of the one solution for things. We're obviously part of a wider, you know, engagement and comms strategy. And, you know, for anybody who's listening to or watching this, you know, there's who might not be working with us, we've got a load of, you know, resources that are available on the website, questions that you can just plug into however you want to survey. So it's not a case of saying it has to be with us or anything like that, although, you know, we'd love to have that conversation. But I want to go back to kind of focusing on the employee voice piece around the flexible working, and to maybe go into not the minutiae of it, but certainly maybe go a little bit more granular in terms of what kind of questions were being asked to sort of get this information that enabled you to kind of build this strategy. It doesn't need to be specific, it could be kind of in general terms, as it were. And then sort of what kind of feedback sort of came back generally. And then was there anything maybe that, this is just my own curiosity more than anything, was there anything that surprised you necessarily about some of the feedback?
I don't think there was anything that surprised us. I think what it did is it reaffirmed some of our views, Ben. So we all talk about the fact that nobody comes to work to do a poor job.
No.
Nobody wants to do that. But the strength of feeling around people going, I really want to be able to balance the challenges I've got at home, but I'm still really committed to producing for the business. Mm-hmm. And the weight of feeling around that was really reassuring for us. And that gave us a strong basis. The questions that we asked were probably, they developed along the way. So we started to talk to people in general terms of what are your worries? What are your concerns? What could we do to try and help you overcome those types of concerns? And that was sometimes really practical help. So, for example, some of our finance colleagues needed 2 screens rather than just the one that they currently had. There was things like that. There were practical issues around being able to access certain applications and information more remotely than what people were doing in the past. But then there was the other type of activities that we had around, well, actually now my kids are at home and I'm having to homeschool them. And I'm really worried about being able to balance that and still play a full part in the business. So what can we do around that? And when we asked people what we could do, they came up with some really good solutions. So at Karbon, we currently have what you would class as a traditional flexi time scheme. Mm-hmm. Which has that benefit of clocking in, clocking out, but working flexibly. But actually, that had with it some time constraints. So we had core hours, and then we had bandwidth, with which people couldn't necessarily work outside of. And actually, colleagues told us that if you can remove that, that would be a massive benefit to us. That was a real surprise for us. We've done that, and the feedback we've had on that's been fantastic from a large number of people. Moving forward, we still have to talk with colleagues around what that might mean for flexi time and how we manage flexibility moving forward. So we haven't reached a final decision on that. But right now, we took away those historical constraints. And I think unless we'd spoken to our colleagues, I'm not sure that we would have necessarily took that step. As an organisation, we might have sat there and gone, maybe that's one of those things that we're not allowed to touch. And getting to that granular level of detail, talking to our colleagues allowed us to almost go, do you know what? There isn't anything that should be off the agenda as to how we can create a flexible working space for people. Getting right into the detail, we start to ask people if the ability to work from home had been a benefit to them, because there's people who can't necessarily do that. That was important for us. We asked people if they were getting the right support at this point in time, and then asked them to tell us what it was if they weren't. And we got some direct feedback, which we had to respond to. But that was fantastic. And I think being able to demonstrate that we weren't frightened of taking on those questions and respond to them gave people confidence with us, Ben. One of the platforms we used is we previously, prior to the pandemic, we did a team talk. And what that involved was us effectively talking to our manager population about things that were going on around the business. And colleagues told us that they wanted to know as well. Sounds a dead simple thing. We opened it up to the whole business, and the response we've got is fantastic. People have been able to put real-time questions to the chief executive about flexible working, and that has really, really opened up that conversation. Yeah. Really, really been fantastic for us. So varied in terms of our approach to questioning, Ben. Something at a higher level, often things then going away and doing some more detailed work with people, whether that be through workshops or through different groups.
Yeah. So like using the survey as the basis, that's where you get your themes from, and then you go to a more concentrated group style for, I suppose, like more of a deep dive into that kind of thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the ability, I mean, I know we've talked about this. I'm a Hive convert. I've not used it before I joined Karbon. I'm not trying to sell it to anybody, but that process really helped us. Our colleagues trust in Hive in terms of the confidentiality that it has and being able to be honest and open through that. And when we go back to them and say, these are the themes that have come from that survey, we immediately get people going, great, I want to engage more with that now. I want to start following up on that. They're happy to put their comments in. And then when we go back to the business, they're able to see that we've listened and we've took that on board. So that has been really helpful. But we still wouldn't have got to where we are now without the other formats. If we just relied on the survey, it probably wouldn't have worked because we wouldn't have been able to explore it in more detail.
Yeah, I know, 100%. I mean, as I say, it needs to be part of a more, this word is so overused these days, but part of a more holistic employee engagement approach, like, yeah, surveys are great, but, almost, and, in terms of kind of the technical side of it, like, is it regular surveys? Is it sort of a policy style approach that you guys go for, or?
Not as regular as other organizations do. We tend to have an annual position, and then we try and do 2 pulse surveys. And then we build around that with our own activities. So we build around that with workshops. We build around that with our own more deeper dives into activities. So we use the sort of survey platform as sort of the key touch points. But then within that, we build on it because we feel as though the people will sometimes can go, it's just another survey. And we want to engage them in different ways. And a massive tip for me is, yes, I work in people and organizational development, but the support that we've had from our marketing and communications team around this and the activities that they have done has been absolutely fantastic. So yeah, one of the things you need to do is to get your team around you. Get your team around you, and it'll just start to fly. To be perfectly honest,
yeah, I've got to say, I really like the idea of that approach in the sense that kind of we get the sort of, as I say, like the themes or the topics or the information that we need from the survey kind of thing, and that's that's getting people initially involved in the process. But then this sort of more action oriented kind of group workshop stuff that you guys do, like that's like the problem solving element of it, and getting people involved in that. I think it's not only engaging them in the sense that they've been, asked what their opinion is, and that's great. It's that they're actually being trusted to come up with the solution as well. And I think that sounds really good, Iain.
Yeah, and for everybody out there, it's not, there is a lot of work that goes into developing those specific programs, but we've already got a really well established system of internal meetings and discussions and touch points. So our directorate teams meet regularly. My team are out there regularly getting involved in those sessions as well. Managers are having those regular one-to-one conversations that are so important to judging and seeing what's actually going on. So the current framework that's already in place is really important. I don't want anybody to think that it's about setting up brand new structures and brand new approaches. Definitely here at Karbon, that consultative and collaborative approach has always been part of it. But I think that it's probably fair to say that the position that we've been in over the last 14 to 15 months has really started to accelerate and deepen the work that we've done in this area. And it's starting to pay dividends in that as well.
Yeah, I've got to say, I think it's commendable. I think that, any organization out there that hasn't, shut up shop and buried their head and kind of gone, look, we're not doing anything now. We're just going to wait and see what happens. I think that, for me, look, there'll be some people, I don't want to be judgmental. There'll be people out there who had to do that and who it worked for them. But ultimately for me, I think it was a gamble. I mean, I speak to people all day, every day. And you hear frequently kind of, oh, well, we didn't survey in 2020 for obvious reasons. And I think I can't help but feel like you missed out, like it was a really, really rich opportunity to get some like I mean, not to denigrate any other opportunity for feedback, but like, when else are people going to be more forthcoming other than kind of when they're going through something as kind of seismic as we all went through,
Absolutely. I mean, it crossed our minds. to possibly not survey people. But after it crossed our minds very quickly, we remained committed to getting that information, and we eventually reached the position where it was going to be even more important over this period of time. And I think, yes, there's been some challenging points that we've had to respond on, we've had to consider, but I think that's actually created more engagement with our colleagues. We've been pretty transparent. We've got areas of our business where flexibility is much more difficult to deliver than others. We've got to be upfront about that, and we've been clear on that from day one. But what we've also said is that we're really committed to listening to you and trying to find ways in which we can work more flexibly. We've got areas of the business that are subject to customer opening hours. They will be visiting people in their homes within certain periods of time. And therefore, it does become a little bit more difficult to give them the flexibility that others may well be having. But we're trying to create the culture where all of those groups can at least start to have the conversations, and we are open to the possibilities of what we can actually do to help them. And that's going to continue. We've done some great things, because for us, working flexibly is more than just being able to make a choice between, for example, working from home and working in the office. We're talking about working in any number of locations, any number of venues. We're talking about improving the working environment that people are in. So we're talking about improving our office environment. And in some of our areas of the business, we've made a massive investment in their working environment. So if I think about our trades colleagues, we've invested massively in their fleet. Now, people might go, well, how does that help them work flexibly? Well, actually, what it does is it creates a better environment. They've got better technology, and that, allied to the fact that we've now got some really good online LMS and training capabilities, stops them from having to always come back to an office to do some training. So they can do that training in a much more flexible way than what they previously did. And all of that contributes to what we're viewing as flexible working at Karbon. So we're trying to take it away from that binary decision of it's just about somebody who works in an office or works at home. It's much wider than that.
Yeah, and you know, and that's the kind of thing that comes from, you know, these conversations, because otherwise, I think you could, you know, somebody certainly could, you know, start to think a bit more, you know, in a more of a binary fashion. I mean, I certainly did. I mean, the idea of, you know, working with, or, you know, myself, like, you know, going and sitting down Tynemouth for an afternoon and doing my job. I kind of think, like, even me, I'm like, oh, that would be a bit wild, wouldn't it? You know, like, you can't, it's like, you know, so yeah, I mean, if I can do it, like, be like odds at home or in the office, but actually it could be anywhere realistically, then, you know, it just opens up a lot more possibilities. You know, more possibilities gives people more freedom, I guess, and that's kind of in and of itself quite an inspiring thing. So
it's about finding that balance, isn't it? About providing that freedom with the position where we're actually going as a business. We're still meeting the needs of the customer and the business, and that's a big thing that we've pushed with people. We've gone, if you can find the balance between those sort of three competing priorities, which they are, then we feel as though that we're going to create a better place for everybody, and we're going to create a place where people want to come to work, because we're trying to strive that balance. We're going back to what I said at the very start. We've been clear with people that they're not always going to hit that balance, and there's going to be slight corrections that we need to make, and some weeks are going to look very different to other weeks in terms of how they work. And as I said, we've said to some colleagues, we're going to need to take a little bit more time and work a little bit harder as to how we can deliver flexibility for yourselves. But we're really committed to listening to you and trying to make these inroads. And that seems to be working really well. We've still got a long way to go, still more work to be done. And as I said, I'll be amazed if we ever reach a point where we simply turn around and go, we've cracked it. I don't think that's possible. I don't think it's possible. But it's something that we can definitely work on together without a shadow of a doubt. And these last few months and the engagement activity we've done has really demonstrated to us the value of operating in that way. Definitely improved, I think, what we might have delivered pre-pandemic.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, look, I mean, for me, I think that's a great place to leave it, Iain. I don't want to take up too much of the rest of your morning, but yeah, thank you so very much for coming on and sharing your story with us. It's been really interesting.
No, thanks for having me. I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to tuning into any more of your Hive sessions as well.
Yeah, well, we got loads more in the book, so yeah, keep an eye out for them, and thank you very much to everybody for watching. As always, I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.